and thank you for tuning in for this spending bill special report.
We will look at the details of this historic bill that not only avoids a shutdown, but also makes some much-needed fixes necessary to keep our economy and nation strong into the future.
And, please remind me, Ted, what those necessary fixes are.
Well, Jane, of course I am referring to the two add-ons that helped garner enough votes for passage of the bill, those being the rolling back of regulations imposed on banks after the last financial meltdown, kindly written for Congress by those always helpful folks at Citigroup, and the tenfold increase in individual campaign contribution limits.
Come again? How were these necessary for avoiding a government shutdown and strengthening the country going forward?
Well, Jane, the logic of these actions is sometimes hard for most people to understand. That is why I have invited Nobel Prize-winning economist J.Z. Moore to help explain.
Good morning, Professor Moore. Can you tell us how these actions will strengthen our nation going forward?
Yes. Good morning. Well, here's how it works. With banks free to speculate on derivatives with tax dollars again, and individuals able to give 10 times more to candidates than they used to. Well, you see, when that all happens. Okay. Honestly, I don't have a friggin' clue where this BS came from or how anyone believes either of these does anything good for the country, let alone why either of these was necessary to keep the government funded and avoid a shutdown. There is simply no explanation, other than to note that this all came from the House of Representatives, which maybe explains a whole lot about it. I mean seriously. This stuff makes the voodoo economics of the past almost seem sensible. In fact, it might be useful to interject some voodoo economics into this discussion right about now. There you go, Jane. Lesson 1 from Voodoo Economics 101. While it doesn't really do anything, it does make you feel better. Why don't you give it a try?
Oh? You are right, Professor. I don't know about the teleporting thing, but that bit there does make me feel better about this budget bill and maybe even the future.
There you go, young lady. How or why in the hell anyone thinks that having Citibank write new rules deregulating banks and increasing campaign contribution limits were necessary for keeping the government functioning is simply beyond me. Next, I expect to hear how my dog going to make my day so much more all better just as soon as the video goes viral. Dumbass, ignorant reporters. They verp out all the nonsensical talking points and expect somebody with a Nobel Prize in economics can make it all seem like it makes sense? And then half of America lines up like sheep waiting to be sheared to take it all in? Oops. Is that still on?
Well, there you have it, Ted. It seems. Oh, wait a moment. It seems Jay-Z has more for us. Professor?
Yes, Jane. There actually are a few interesting points to this bill that we should touch on. Congress did show some fiscal restraint by reducing support for soldiers and their families. This will certainly help pay for the warplanes they put in, even though the Pentagon didn't even ask for them. They also cut education, put a pay freeze on the executive branch, and refused to address minimum wage issues. So maybe it isn't all selfish pork barrel stuff. No doubt the raise Congress gave itself with this budget is well deserved. Then, there are the immigration and Obamacare issues, which this bill doesn't even touch, which seems a bit odd if you ask me. If anyone figures that part of all this nonsense out, I would love for them to explain it to me. And finally, there is the marijuana legalization in the District of Columbia, which voters passed by a margin of 2-1 in the last election, but will be defunded, and therefore negated, by this bill. How members of Congress were able to vote to pass this still steaming pile of without having a good hearty toke, is completely beyond me. I am sorry to interrupt, Professor, but we are about out of time for this segment. I am sure there will be a lot to discuss in the coming days.
But I suppose we are on to sports now?
Yes. And we will be right back with the details of LeBron's new contract, where each basket he makes will pay him about 4 times what an average full-time waiter or waitress earns in a year.